1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 through 27. Verses 19 through 23. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Burkett notes, in these verses, our apostle proceeds to show the Corinthians farther how mightily he abridged himself of his Christian liberty, which was the argument he was insisting upon. For, says he, though I be free from all men, as being a servant to none, yet I have made myself as a servant to all, that I might gain the more to embrace the gospel. To the unconverted Jews he became as a Jew, circumcising Timothy for their sakes, Acts 26:3, that he might gain the Jews. To them who in their opinion were yet under the obligation of the ceremonial law, he carried himself as a person under the law, though he knew himself free from it, to the end that he might gain them that are under the law. And accordingly he purified himself in the temple, Acts 21. To them that were without law, that is, the Gentiles, who were without the ceremonial law, he became as a person without law, abstaining from the use of all ceremonies as they did, but yet not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that is, as to the moral law of God, which was not abolished, but reinforced by Christ. He did never account himself free from that, nor durst anything contrary to the eternal rule of righteousness. And all this that he might gain them that are without law. To the weak converts, either Jews or Gentiles, he became as weak, by abstaining what might hurt their weak consciences. That so he might gain the weak. Finally, he became all things to all men, by compliance with them in all lawful and indifferent things, that he might gain as many as he possibly could. And all of this he did for the gospel's sake, that the gospel might be better esteemed and further propagated, and he might himself partake of the promises and rewards of it, together with them to whom he preached it, and had effectually entertained it. Behold here the humility and charity of this great apostle, his ready condescension to the pitiable weakness of all men, his compliance with them in all lawful and indifferent things for the glory of God and the advantage of the gospel. A rare and singular pattern for all ministers and private Christians to imitate and follow. Now from this example of St. Paul's becoming all things to all men and making himself a servant unto all, we learn one great duty of a gospel minister is not to be a slave to any, but a servant to all. Not a servant to their lusts, but to their weaknesses and infirmities. Our apostle did not turn as the flattering and false apostles did with the tide and times, nor conform to them in what was sinful. He did not symbolize with all colors, nor was he a man for all hours and humors. For, says he, if I please men, he means in anything that is sinful, I am no more the servant of Christ. Galatians 1:10. But wisely considering the case and state of all men, he did accommodate his ministry for the gaining of as many as possibly he could. Some are all things to all men, that they might gain by all. A spirit not only unworthy of a minister, but of a man. But St. Paul complied with all men, and made himself the servant of all, that Christ might thereby gain, his gospel gain, yea, and they themselves gain, which hints to us a second observation. The great end which the holy apostle aimed at in this his compliance with and condescension towards the weakness of his people. This I do for the gospel's sake, as if he had said, though I thus stoop and yield to all men, it's to serve my master, not myself. Think not that I thus put myself into all forms towards men for my own preferment in the world, but that Christ may be preferred in the hearts and acceptations of all men. I please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. 1 Corinthians 10:33. Behold here the noble mark which this minister of Christ had in his eye, the saving of souls. That he might hit it, he wisely observed the temper and state of his people, striving to render himself agreeable and acceptable unto all, that he might by all means save some. Yet had he also an eye to himself in all this. He had respect to the recompense of reward, as lawfully he might. This I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be a partaker thereof with you. That is, that I may have a share myself in the promised rewards of the gospel, which I have preached to you. Blessed be God, it is lawful for all the ministers and members of Christ to do good out of hope of reward, and that his glory and our own happiness are so inseparably connected and knit together that by promoting the former, we secure the latter. Verse 24. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run, that you may obtain. Burkitt notes, our apostle, according to his custom in sundry epistles, does in the end of this chapter fall upon the use of terms agonistical, borrowed from the Olympic and other Grecian games, celebrated near Corinth, in which the contending parties had put forth all their strength to outdo one another. These games were running, cuffing, and wrestling, all which the apostle here alludes unto, and first to running. They which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run the Christian race that you may obtain the prize. Learn hence that Christianity is a race which God had set us, and it's our duty faithfully and perseveringly to run it. In a race, the foundation of it is a prize. In a race, there's a considerable distance between one goal and another. In a race, plat for the racers to run in, there are certain laws to run by, and there's a certain judge to determine who wins the crown fairly. Now this race of Christianity vastly differs from all other races thus. This is a spiritual race. It strains not legs and lungs, but faith and patience. Other races are performed by natural abilities, but this by a supernatural power and strength. Those races might be run without disturbance, but not this. Their reward but a garland of bays, ours a crown of immortality. But what is it to run this race? Answer, it supposes a motion. It imports a vehement and intense motion. It implies progress and proficiency. Every step brings the racer nearer the goal, and it implies perseverance. The racer must hold on to the last, or lose his labor and reward. Everyone that thus runs shall obtain the prize, whereas in other races, but one receiveth the prize. Verse 25. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. Burkitt notes, it was a custom among those that used at Corinth the aforementioned games of running and wrestling to tie themselves to a strict prescribed diet, both for quality and quantity, by way of preparation. They did not indulge themselves in gluttony or any sort of excess, but were temperate in all things, that the crown might be won by them, which, alas, was nothing but a garland of leaves and flowers, in intimation of whom he advised the Corinthians to be very moderate in the use of all worldly things, and to abstain from whatsoever may hinder their running the Christian race, and their receiving the incorruptible crown. Verse 26. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. Burkitt notes, that is, I run this race of Christianity myself, which I advise unto you, but my care is to run sure, not at uncertainties, to make sure of the crown at the end of the race. And I do not only run, but fight. I oppose whatever opposes me. Here observe, the apostle changes the metaphor from that of running to the other game of cuffing, and says he did not fight like one that beats the air, but never hurts the adversary. No, he fought in good earnest with all his spiritual enemies, the flesh, the world, and the devil. It is not every running that will gain the prize, nor every fighting that will obtain the victory, but it must be a running with all perseverance and a fighting with our utmost power that will bring us to heaven and eternal happiness. Verse 27. But I keep my underbody. Burkitt notes, the original word may be fitly rendered, I give myself blue eyes, alluding to the Olympic game of cuffing, in which the combatants were wont with their blows to beat one another till they made each other livid, their eyes black and blue. The sense is that by mortification he used great severity upon himself, contending against and combating with the body of sin and death, which did obstruct and hinder him in running the Christian race which was set before him. Verse 27 continued. And bring it into subjection. Burkitt notes, the word in the Greek is an allusion to the other exercise of wrestling, wherein the antagonists or contenders do strive to cast each other to the ground and keep them under. So he, the better to subdue his body with sin, was careful to keep down the body of flesh, which if pampered is apt to rebel. He concludes with a reason why he exercised all this care and caution, namely, verse 27 last, lest by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be cast away. Burkitt notes, that is, lest when he had acquainted them with the laws and rules of Christianity and proposed to them the way of striving and getting the crown, he himself should at last prove a castaway, or one unworthy to be approved or rewarded by God. From whence observe one, that it is possible for him who has been all his life preaching to others and furthering them in their way to heaven, to be thrown himself into hell at last. Many that have prophesied in Christ's name shall yet perish in his wrath, and such as have cast devils out of others shall be cast to the devils themselves. Observe, too, that such ministers as indulge in their unruly appetites, giving the flesh whatever it craves, and can deny it nothing it desires, pampering the body to the prejudice of the soul, go not in St. Paul's road to heaven, but the contrary. They gratify what he mortified. They indulge what he subdued. He administered to the wants, they to the wantonness of the flesh. He knew that Hagar would quickly perk up and domineer over Sarah, that the body would quickly expect and command more attendance than the soul, except it were kept under. And for this reason, says our apostle here, I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest by that any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be cast away.